one problem that the opposition says, one, government does not recognize there is a problem, or does not, if you don't recognize the problem, you cannot solve it.
Absolutely.
Two, the solutions that the government has come up with so far, according to the opposition, it's not working. For example, corporate tax cuts. They're saying the corporates will only look at their NPAs and address that issue if you give that same money to the poor man. That poor man will at least put that money to buy things and pump that money in the market.
Right. So I've always, maintained this, that the government has been in denial. It's all about manufacturing a narrative. And because this was an election year, so until elections were over, they were in denial mode. They're like, nothing is wrong with the economy. Various reports were churned out saying that there are no job losses. Everything is hunky-dory. Now that there is a problem and it's very evident, they have gone into a damage control mode. But unfortunately, they have been very late about this. And yes, corporate tax rate cuts are good, and they were promised 4 years ago, and the government has finally delivered on them. But again, you cannot expect an impact immediately. I have to agree with Rajeev on this, that the entire narrative and the entire policy focus has been on spurring investment.
Yes.
It's consumption that has taken a hit. Look at your automobile sales, your FMCG products. FMCG products are the last, literally, to take a hit, because those are basic necessities.
I mean, as the name suggests, it's fast-moving consumer goods.
Absolutely. So consumption has been on a decline, and the government has been they have not been very focused in their policy. They've not presented a coherent vision of how they see India and the Indian economy. What are the 5 things you're going to focus on, and then you go after it. A series of press conferences.
Are they working in silos? I mean, look at the automobile sector. The automobile sector was doing so good. You come up with new rules about, BS6 and not BS4, and suddenly there's a slump in BS4 car sales.
Somebody, Gaurav, is advising the government that even if there's no demand, people will start investing in the automobile industry. That's not how it's going to happen.
And that's not what's happening.
If your capacity utilization is at 40-50%, how do you expect the auto industry to start spending money into creating fresh capacities? That's crazy. So it's the whole focus on investment is required, but it's not required at this stage. At this stage, we need to deal with consumption, and consumption can only be triggered with tax cuts, by ensuring that the repo rate which has been cut is transmitted fully. Even till today, the repo rate has not been fully transmitted to
the banks are keeping that.
Because banks are keeping that, and it's also in the interest of the government, because if the banks are not retaining it, government will have to fund those banks.
Okay, so, Congress Party Supriya joining us on the broadcast. Supriya, your first reaction? The figures are now finally out. GDP growth down to 4.5%, and the Congress, of course, has been saying that it's the government policies. Your first take on these figures?
So I'm going to give 2 takes on this. One is going to be political, and the other is going to be my understanding of Indian economy. And one is not surprised with this number. One is sad today, because if growth levels fall to the kind of numbers that we are seeing, which is 4.5%, this is a 6-year low. Let us also not lose sight of the fact that nominal GDP has actually fallen to 6.1%. And that is the lowest, I think, we've seen since March of 2009. So it is a hit on every sector of the economy. I heard consumption being discussed, and that's exactly what has caused this. India was never an investment-led economy. Consumption is the mainstay of economic growth, and this government, instead of incentivizing consumption, goes ahead and spends its economic capital and money in things that are not going to move the needle. So it does give you a sense, and I've been saying this at the cost of sounding repetitive, it is almost a government that seems to be Alice in Wonderland, bewildered and doesn't know what to do. There is no clear economic thinking. And if I may actually point out to the devil which really lies in the detail, the manufacturing